Hi, good morning. Thank you. Thank you for allowing us to present a sneak peek of This is Reading, and we're really excited to share it with you in this very beautiful space. What you're going to be seeing today is a very, very small fragment of This is Reading, which is a multimedia performance installation that's going to be reanimating a long vacant Franklin Street Railroad station in downtown Reading, Pennsylvania, with the stories of the city. Our aim is really to respond to what's happening in America today by creating a beautiful piece of art and storytelling that really invites people into each other's lives. We feel now more than ever it's important for us to generate work that reflects, that celebrates, and also illuminates the complexity and the diversity of our culture. Move beyond just articulating our frustration with the present situation and actually do something to change it. And I want to give you just a tiny bit of context. This is Reading began for me with an email that I received from a very dear friend in 2011. She was a single mother of two, and she hadn't worked in months and was completely broke and beyond desperate. She had been hiding her circumstances from friends and family, and I read her email and I actually wept, because she's someone who I saw almost every single day, and she had a very easy smile, which was really betraying hardships and difficulties. And I felt it was far too familiar reality for many Americans. And her raw and her emotional email made me really acutely aware of the fact that we all live in shouting distance from someone who's experiencing real economic insecurity. And it awakened me to my own complacency, and my response was to ask very difficult questions about how and why this was happening in a country as wealthy as the United States. And as a result, I began visiting Reading, Pennsylvania, which is a Rust Belt city, which also happens to have been the poorest city of its size in all of America. And I wanted to understand how economic insecurity was really shifting the American narrative, and how a city that had once been thriving and had been a powerhouse was now in such a crisis. And so over the course of 5 years, with a team of collaborators, we began interviewing literally anyone who would talk to us. We spoke to 3 mayors, 3 police chiefs, local historians, community activists, organizers, steelworkers, business owners, addicts, dancers, educators, artists, and urban farmers. And what we found, that they all had something in common. When we asked them to describe their city, the majority of them always said, Reading was. They spoke of their town in past tense. And it struck me that a place that couldn't describe itself in present or future tense was a place that was really very much in crisis. So our goal now is to make a piece of art that places a city that's divided in dialogue, and to build empathy and provide an avenue of self-exploration and healing. Our goal is simple. We want to amplify the voices of people in Reading, and by doing so, forge and build bridges in a city that's really woefully fractured along economic and racial lines. We endeavor to create a new model of art and civic engagement that defies the limitations that are posed by cultural institutions. We will transform this non-traditional venue, which is a dead zone, into a performance space and bring free art and storytelling to people who are not accustomed to being invited into cultural spaces, to crossing those thresholds. Ultimately, we are interested in creating moments when the stories of the community intersect, where they share a common vocabulary that helps them understand that they're all part of a unified whole. So This is Reading will be a fresh and exciting means of civic and artistic engagement that helps the city explore who they are now and who they want to be. And in doing so, we've assembled a team to probe this question that included documentary filmmakers, visual artists, theater makers, community members, city planners, cultural anthropologists, and gamers. We invited them to Reading to engage with the city, explore, reflect, and then help conceptualize the piece. What we heard from the community when we asked is that they want something that's beautiful. They want something that's spectacular, and they want something that reflects the liveliness of their city. They don't want to be reminded of their past or their present woes, but rather they want to celebrate what keeps the city very much alive, and that's the people. So Reading has an amazing creative team, a few who are present with us today, including filmmaker Tony Gerber, theater director Kate Whoriskey, projection designer Jeff Sugg, composer Kashaka, and actors Russell G. Jones and Michael Puzo. The rest of the team is actually back in Reading because we're premiering on July 14th, and so they're in the process of building the installation. And those members include choreographer Rennie Harris, lighting designer Amit Chander, sound designer Nick Cortides, set designer Deb O, and costume designer Jennifer Moeller. And what you're going to see today is just a very small fragment of this site-specific piece. However, in its completed form, it's going to be 7 movements that fill this abandoned train station with a lot of life, incorporating dance and theater and film elements. You will see movements 1, 4, and 7. And so movement 1, imagine, this is Reading Was. This is an interview-inspired first movement dance theater piece reflecting back on the Franklin Street Railroad Station before the economic downturn in that city. There will be lights, archival sounds, projections that move us through the life of the busy station before the decline, to the dilapidated shell, to the present-day renovated space, but now still abandoned station. Performers will emerge from the audience as if ghosts, reclaiming the space, one by one telling their stories.
I was born in Reading.
I was born in Reading.
I was born in Reading in 1963.
1949, July 1st.
1913.
1951.
In the 18th Ward, west of Schuylkill River on a little street off of Lancaster Avenue, only 1 block long.
Now, my father, Abraham McCracken, he came to Reading in 1929 from Thomasville, North Carolina. Now, he was born in 1865, the year after slavery.
My great-grandmother came right from Poland. They left when the Nazis took over Poland in 1939.
My family moved here from South Carolina when my grandma made what I like to call a career decision to leave the cotton plantation and to work for the textile industries in Reading. She didn't like the way the cotton made her fingers feel, and she didn't want to kill any more chickens, so she was going up to the big city.
They were born in Germany, Pennsylvania Deutsch, and they came here to work and to build a new life.
There were factories in Reading, chain and cable steel mills, textile, and the railroad. Now, my father was fortunate. He started working in construction. He made 40 cents a day, paid 8 cents an hour. So lots of construction was happening. So you would get hired quick, and they would work people till they dropped, and then take them out in wheelbarrows, and the next guy would go in.
I was born in Reading.
I was born in Reading.
I lived on the 500 block of Moss Street, Northeast Reading. Working-class families, mostly white folks, row homes. They were absolutely teeny tiny, 13 or 14 feet across, 2 stories with an attic and a basement.
We lived in a small little house on 13th and Green.
I lived on Front Street.
It was 346 North Front Street.
1428 Birch Street. The neighborhood was a melting pot for the people. Second generations, third generation. I was first generation because my parents came from Germany. Growing up, people used our neighborhood as a starter neighborhood, and it was mostly German, Italian, and Jewish people. And then the neighborhood changed, and new people came. Italy.
Trinidad.
Puerto Rico.
Poland.
North Carolina.
Dominican Republic.
Romania.
Virginia.
My father worked for the Reading Railroad at age 14 as a telegraph messenger boy. He managed to lie about his age and got a job when he was only 14. And in the early 1930s, he became a ticket agent for the Franklin Street station. And then the railroad transferred him to the freight side, and he worked for the Reading Railroad for his entire career until he retired in 1967.
Then my father got a job working for the railroad as a red cap porter. So he swept floors, he cleaned toilets, he shined shoes, carried bags for people on and off the train. He was self-educated. He had a third-grade education, but he taught himself how to read and write. And that's how he survived. And I remember as a young boy going to the train station early in the morning and seeing hundreds of people lined up, reading newspapers.
Those were good days. My first train ride recollection was about 1944. I rode the train from Reading to visit my grandparents in Harrisburg. And we had a wonderful time visiting our grandparents. And on the return trip, I forgot my teddy bear. I left him on the train. And I was heartbroken. And my dad called the Reading Help Company to ask for help. And a few days later, I received my teddy bear in the mail. The railroad people sent him back. And he was packed in a Hershey candy box with a candy bar. My father was a commercial painter.
My father was a grocer. My mother was a
I
television
dropped out of
producer.
college 3 times. Found my
I
way to
worked
writing.
in the chocolate factory,
I
Palmer's.
was an ordained pastor, chaplain.
My mother was a seamstress.
Worked in a steel factory.
The outlet mall.
Security guard prison. My father was the manager of Penn Hardware until he went bankrupt.
My mother worked at Chicken Factory, and my father
I was a secretary, teacher, psychologist. I grew up in a Polish neighborhood,
The neighborhood was all Poles.
and until I was 8, I thought I was Polish. I even talked with an accent. And I remember getting jumped by a couple of white boys in the park. And one of the guys from my street stopped the fight, and he said, "Hey, he's Polish. He's one of us." On my block, we were all brothers, but elsewhere, well, we experienced racism, prejudice, and I can recall being in school, grade school, being one of probably 2 or 3 blacks in a classroom of 30, and I can remember teachers, not treating us the same. And I can remember hearing things like, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch a nigger by the toe, and that kind of thing from the teacher. And I don't think that's right, And what we learned about blacks in school was, little black Sambo, and that we were taught that slaves were lazy and shiftless.
We played
Stickball,
fast business.
hopscotch.
tackle football.
Corner stores.
I loved living so close to my family. I could shout down the street to my grandma who lived across the park. And that park, that's one of the nicest places in the city. It's on 3rd and
Spruce.
5th.
9.
Reading was wonderful, booming.
Crystal Palace.
Movie palaces,
The Christmas parade.
fairs.
Oh, golly. My favorite place in Reading was the train station. My father worked there. And what I remember particularly was Jim McCracken. He was a colored man who was a porter at the Franklin Street station. And for whatever reason, I'm not sure, but he took a liking to me. He was a big man, big hands. And I felt really secure when he took me by the hand and walked me around.
I remember my father was so personable. He didn't make much money, so he really depended on his tips. So it was all about service. And it was service with a smile, and with a certain flair. And the people that, were more personable people got bigger tips and better tips. So that was a lesson that I learned from him. And the fact that he was black in a time when the red caps and the porters were black. And they had to yes, sir, and no, sir, and yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, and take a lot of crap. But people respected him. And they knew that if they went to the train station, that Big Jim was going to watch after them, he was going to protect them, and they didn't have to be afraid. And I've had lawyers and doctors and judges come up to me and say, as a small boy, I used to go to the train station. And it was your father who was the person who gave us the nickels and dimes and quarters and told us to stay out of trouble. It was your dad was there when I arrived in Reading, and I didn't have any place to go, and he told me who I could talk to and where I could find a place to live and where I could find a job and who would help me. And there were people who were doing time. And the stipulation was that if McCracken will be your sponsor, I'll let you out of jail. I'll let you out of prison. And that's the person he was.
Bridget,
Willie,
Magdalena.
Lukesh,
Ida.
Rogelio.
Wilhelm. There were different cultural pockets in neighborhoods in Reading, whether it be Polish or Slavic or Italian, but everybody got along wonderfully. You know, we saw these different people coming into the neighborhood who were either black or Hispanic, and my father, he hired everyone. And I think that's why his market was so successful.
They came in slowly from everywhere.
But things change. They always do. Became more Hispanic and Latino, and my father sold his grocery store to a wonderful Hispanic man and his family, and now the supermarket is still there. It's under a different name now, but it's still there.
Yeah, it was a good time. And then when those outlets started closing, and you'd see the damage and the graffiti and the bricks thrown through the windows, and the factories, well, they began closing.
When the change came, I was born in Reading.
I was born in Reading.
I was born in Reading.
That Reading terminal, that train station on 7th and Franklin Station was a mecca. It was the place, and it was a real melting pot. And people came from everywhere, from the west, from the north, from the south, from the east, and they came to this place. And my father, he was a gatekeeper, if you will. And people came into the community. They saw him. He was the biggest man. He could light Lady Liberty, you know. He was a big, tall guy. And you couldn't help but see him. And he came, and he was warm, and you welcome, loving, friendly, kind, all those things that you need to have. It's lost its life. The railroad was the life of this town because when you know, it's like anything else. It's connecting the dots. See, everything has to, okay, if you're building anything, it has to be a connection. There has to be a connection. If you're building a company, company is people, places, and things. And Reading, it lost its life when it lost the passenger line.
I was born in Reading.
I was born in Reading.
I was born in Reading in 1963.
1949, July 1st.
1913.
1951.
In the 18th Ward.
We look up and God looks down, and the experience fills us with optimism. Movement 4 is called Reading Soars. My name is Tony Gerber. I'm a co-creator of This Is Reading with Lynn Nottage and Kate Whoriskey. Reading Soars was born of our 5 years of research in Reading, in which we heard from folks, lifelong residents of Reading, who couldn't see beauty around them. The pagoda on the hill, the freight train running north, the incredible housing stock were all reminders of a lack of agency. These were people who would leave if they could, but they didn't have the means. So Reading Soars is a gift of new vision. It will take our audience from the rural outskirts of the city, through the downtown, past the factories, smokestacks, to streets filled with school kids. It'll be accompanied by a sound score by Kashaka, and this is an excerpt from it, but what you'll see is 3 dancers, each on an individual location, one in a field, one on an abandoned train track. And you're not going to see that part today because we haven't filmed it yet. But these dancers will then be followed, and they will lead us to the train station. So Movement 4, Reading Soars. Thank you to our technicians who helped us get that image on the ceiling. It was no small feat. So the idea is that is a 3-channel video that will be projected on the ceiling of the Franklin Street train station. Movement 7, Seeing Being Seen, is the final act. It was inspired in the course of our research, where we posed a central creative question for ourselves, which was, how do we get a city that's fractured to be in dialogue with itself? How do we get individuals to see their neighbors, to see others, to actually look at each other? So we found our inspiration in the spectacle of the public sports arena on the Jumbotron, and the simple idea that people love to see themselves big. They love to see their neighbors seeing themselves big. And so in spring of 2017, we built a portrait studio in the back of a truck, and we drove around Reading and invited residents to sit for live portraits. Live portraits, as distinct from still portraits, require that the subject hold the gaze and sit for live action footage, right? So the adjustment is that they are looking into another person's eyes. They're looking into my eyes for 60 seconds, and my face and my eyes are transposed by optical mirror over the front of the camera lens. So the effect is that you, the audience, are looking into the eyes of the subject. And what this does is it creates an electric circuit of human emotion, right? So when you see, they see you, seeing being seen.
I was born in Reading in 1963.
I was born in Reading.
I was born in Reading. I was born in Reading in 1963.
I was born in Reading.
I was born in Reading.
Hello. We're just setting up for the next panel. And at this stage, I would like to call on stage Professor Andrei Gerolimatos, who is the director of the Stavros Niarchos Foundation Center for Hellenic Studies at the Simon Fraser University, and a member of Canada's National Security Council, to speak about Beyond Wonder, the infinite and lure of cyberspace.